With the manufacturing data and the US Fed's growth outlook that sank the market sentiment last week, investors are anxiously waiting for the GDP growth data on Thursday. Now, across the Atlantic, the European policymakers assemble to figure a way out of the crisis as well. Amid this global nervousness, how should the Indian investor position himself to make the most of the current chaos? Here are some invaluable tips from Vallabh Bhansali, chairman at Enam Securities.
The environment has been difficult, Nikunj, for a while. If at all, I'm seeing two trends. I'm seeing that all the effort to bring up smiles in the short term are failing and are, kind of facing a wall that, what to do next. But I think what has been happening at subterranean level is that there is a lot of realization about the mistakes of the past and about the limitations of engineered growth, which I think is fantastic news. That's what makes me more hopeful about the world. And it's very important at this point of time when it is very difficult to see the full part of the glass to try and see that, because I think it's covered in mist completely. And this is the part which is covered in mist. Coming specifically to Europe, while indeed on the economic front, deep difficulty, on the political front, it is doing something that needed to be done for a long period of time. Just as Mrs. Margaret Thatcher, brought back the balance in our movement towards the left, I think something similar is happening again on the front of, what democracy means. And are people to take short-term and narrow choices every time they elect a government, or there are wider and bigger issues that they must engage with and balance them with the short-term expectations and needs. And I think Europe is giving a fantastic account. The European Union is a dream that is based on so much rationality, so much debate. It's unprecedented in human history. And therefore, I continue to look at that space with a lot of intrigue, with a lot of eagerness and expectation. And I remain on balance optimistic.
But within the European Union, there is a split. Some want austerity, some want growth. Do you think growth and austerity can coexist?
They always do. Like just as you have a brake and an accelerator in a car. And you have a handbrake from time to time. So when a car comes to a complete, to a halt with a jolt, you just feel that, okay, all momentum is lost. But you have to pick it up again. And I think a time will come, because those who wanted to pull the brakes did not want to stop the engine. They wanted to course correct. They wanted to recognize a newer pace at which you can move. So I think, indeed, I expect the growth measures to, come on the table very soon, much sooner than most people expect.
But are central banks doing the right thing by printing money? And do you think this Keynesian model ultimately will backfire?
See, the Keynesian model has been used and abused several times in the last 50, 60 years or 70 years. And people know the limitations. Indeed, it is the twin difficulty of welfare democracy and the Keynesian mechanism that have, created difficulty. And that's what I call engineered growth. This is engineered growth. That, short-term smile for eternal long-term pain. I think that's the correction that's happening world over. That the US consumer, the average citizen, the average politician, they are all, by and large, changed people. This may not be evident today, because there is no stake in the long term which is diffuse and distant. We all have a stake in the short term which is immediate, and you can make a buck out of it, or a TRP out of it, which is a different matter. But I think it's very, very important at this point of time to see that like all the waves, that there's always a new form of wave being made, even as the waters seem to recede. And I see that very clearly.
But globally, are global markets pricing in too much of risk? If I look at German bond yields or US bond yields, they are at a record low. And do you think this global risk environment will continue for at least one more year?
See, the trouble is that we have a lot of liquidity sloshing around the world. And it will follow the fashion for the day. And therefore, the underlying understanding that, there is nowhere else to go may not be reflected in what you're seeing in short term. In the short term, it is the loose liquidity, which is so much that wherever it will move, it will alter the yield curves. But I think the money manager at large is continuing to look at different opportunities. You, of course, need some stability. I think the trouble is not that people are not optimistic, but it is just a matter of coincidence, just as you had between 2004 and 2007, that every country, every asset class was performing. You have a situation where no country and no asset class seems capable of holding any kind of money. We go through in history periods of this kind. So I think this will change. This will change. I can't say in the next month or next 2 months, but I think this will happen, I'm sure, and not far into the future.
Infosys is a great company, but will it remain a great company? Because for the first time in many years, Infosys has indicated that, look, we will grow at a run rate which is lower than the industry average.
Infosys has a way of giving guidance, which is different from what they would like to believe they should grow at. If they say that they don't make the industry, and they don't know what the industry will grow at, except going by what other people put out the projection to be. So they've taken average of that and said that, look, if this is the rate at which the industry hopes to grow, we will not meet that rate. Which I think, when it comes to projections, over the years I have found, they don't cook anything. They don't put anything which they can't see today. This is what they see today, and that's what they're saying. Infosys was a great company, is a great company, and I think will remain a great company. There's no question about it. I've read a lot of comments and a lot of advice being given to Infosys. And since you mentioned it, I'll use this occasion and your platform to spend a minute or so on it. At any point of time, in an economy, you will have rag pickers and you will have palace builders. You will have very few palace builders. Infosys was a palace builder. They said we need certain class, we'll position ourselves in a certain manner. Our product, service, corporate view will be of a certain order. It wasn't easy. They needn't have done it. But those who decide to do it, a fallow season, a missed quarter, is everybody's, nobody's beyond it. I think they just had that. I think constantly they have pulled up their company, facing so many different crises. I have been a part of so many stories, Nikunj, in this country, that many looked more promising. But if they didn't have the governance, they didn't have the discipline, a lot of them have moved forward, but I know more have not moved forward despite having all that. So I think it's only where your resolve, your value system, they continue to grow in the face of difficulties, that you create a company like Infosys or some of the other groups in the country. I see all of that continue, and continue with a greater keenness, with a greater extent. So I think Infosys will continue to remain a great company. It is so silly to say drop margin. That's what India is known for. Every sector where Indians enter, we drop prices. But that's the simplest strategy in business. They have deserved and they have earned a big margin, a higher margin than the industry for years. Not because it was very easy, not because there was, there was no supplier, there was no competition. But they always thought of an extra thing. In an uncertain world, when your company is as large as $8-10 billion, it takes a greater effort. I think they are man up to it. And I think we should all be wishing that let there be at least one company in India which should remain a palace builder and not come to rag picking.
What about the Sterlite Group? Are you happy with the restructuring, what they've done?
Sterlite is a very different story in the sense that it's a group that is happy taking risk. They've taken more risk than any other group in India in recent years, because the bulk of the growth has come in the last 10 years, and it's mind-boggling growth. But if you see that, they have created growth which has cash flows. I think when you have cash flows, and it's not all futuristic, your strength is very different. The risk is mitigated by the cash flows. I think because the group chose to become a PLC company, and it had constraints, and they did something very heartening, that they put money in a PSU or in a couple of PSUs, and they made them grow. as if it was my daughter's property. It's unthinkable really in the environment that we live in, where someone has partnered growth. So I see Titan, another case where there's a government as a partner and private companies has put in so much effort in building into a fantastic company, and so also Hindustan Zinc and Balco. So they had these difficulties that having a government company, having a PLC company, having local companies, they needed to do some reorganization. Whenever you do any reorganization with so many different parts to it, there will be parts which seem to be well taken care of and less taken care of. On the whole, I think what has been done will create value for shareholders. I cannot say that there may have been parts where people will have to views about it, whether it was right, the measure was right, the direction was right. It's possible, but one must look at the overall scene, and I think overall it was right.